Okay.
All right, folks, here we are in the last day of class as far as us being together, recording and sharing these classes. And we're going to start by talking about adult immersion programs, which if you're in Canada, they call them adult immersion programs. So there's just a little dialect lesson for you as we get started, and I'll turn it over to you folks.
All righty, hello. I should have made sure I could see what I'm seeing. I like to be lazy and just leave it out of present mode because it ends up throwing me off. You'd think I'd have enough practice by now. So my part is on the root word method, which is the Mohawk Six Nations Grand River Territory. And the reason I chose this was after hearing Brian Miracle, who is also known as Owen Natekha, present at the 2018 Alaska Native Language Institute. I was just so excited and impressed, and everything resonated. All the issues that I struggle with were issues that he addressed. Everything, I just felt like he was, when he was giving his background, he was telling my life story related to studying language, still unable to speak, lots of effort, lots of years, lots of classes, lots of formal, informal, and not getting to the point of being able to speak and understand and have a sense of fluency. So the name translates to our language society. They're Ankwawena Kantoyakwa program. And so it is an adult immersion program. And I'm going to skip to here where there's a first year, a second year, a third year. So at the time when he presented to us in Fairbanks, there were only 2 years available. So they have since added a third year option. It is basically a full school year, which is pretty exciting, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, September to May. And one of the things that they made sure to point out is that not only do the teachers get paid, but the students get paid to attend. So this is their job for that school year, is to study and learn. They also have online programs, and this is something that I was looking at in getting ready for this presentation, and I was excited again. I mean, everything just feels like what I wish to do. And so their intro course is a 9-week course, and you need to complete it to be ready for Unit 1. And then each of the units are separate and build on the previous ones. And they are made specifically to take longer because they understand it's an opportunity for people who can't commit to the full-time immersion program. And so they don't have scheduled meetings, but those can be arranged. So I know that we have so much to cover, so I tried to condense most of every few minutes. And this is what it looks like.
At first glance, these words are completely
Oops,
different.
wait, pause. Let me make sure I'm sharing my sound.
Programs learn them as separate and unrelated. But students at Ungwawana do not learn or see these as whole words. Instead, they are taught the small bits of meaning contained within those words, bits of meaning that we call roots, that have to do with he and she and they, and houses and beds and animals, and nice and old and ugly. The students learn how to assemble these roots into whole words. They also learn how to substitute she for he, and they for she, and bed for house, and animal for bed, and old for nice, and ugly for old.
And then a little bit more at the end.
For example, in just a few weeks, students learn how to combine 11 prefixes and 70 noun roots and 20 verb roots, a total of 101 roots that can be together combined to create more than 15,000 words. The root word method works because it's much easier and faster to learn 100 roots than it is to learn 15,000 words. In the entire year, students have to learn approximately 600 roots, plus 200 prefixes and suffixes, and the rules for putting them together, and the exceptions. But once they have learned these 800 bits of meaning, students can create, literally, millions of single words. Students using the root word method, then, are not remembering words that they've been taught, because it's impossible to teach a million words, let alone learn or remember them. Instead, students are learning how to think in the language. They're not trying to remember what someone told them, they're thinking how to say what they want to say. The root word method was first developed by David Gonadawako Miracle, and later refined by Ongwawana. Because Ganyongeha and other Iroquoian languages share the same grammar and structure, the root word method can easily be used by other language groups. At present, the only other language program using the root word method is the Adult Immersion program at Tyendinaga.
So we talked about that, and one of the other things that excited me, this is the entry test. So in order to attend the immersion program, they take an entry test, and he plays it up really fun and cool, and they give all the answers because we want them to be successful. So the first step, and so this is what it looks like on the webpage with the speaker icon so that you can hear a fluent speaker say each of the words, and then there's the rest following. And so my takeaways after the institute that was reinforced after looking into this was the color coding. The color coding of our polysynthetic words. So since our words are structured in the same way that theirs are, put together differently, that just lit a light bulb for me, and I was excited. And then we begin by memorizing the endings with automaticity. So if the starting point, like that is what I've been aiming for, is to actually learn our endings so that I can understand. And if we make that our first step, it just sets the foundation for much faster, quicker learning, because we then have that structure to be able to hear better. So, and there is a best way to progress. So you go from simple to complex, and simple to complex isn't necessarily what we would expect. So it's based on the chunks, the roots, the chunks of the words, not what seems simple, not those things that we might do most frequently and readily. So if we're going to build on the complexity, then we actually really need to understand the language to see where those patterns are. And I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting closer. The other piece was using the ACTFL for assessing fluency, and the descriptors of novice, intermediate, and advanced, and the low, mid, and high application of each of those levels just opened my mind to being able to speak more intellectually and usefully about how much we know and understand. He's big on using apps for studying, and showed us how they use Anki, mentioned Quizlet, and then I'm now looking at Memrise. And the idea being that students are creating their own flashcards. It's not something that they present. I still feel the need to like make these and have them ready for people to study. But each person organizing their own to put together what they need is just powerful. So the piece that stood out again was how he shared a before and after video of this guy, Ryan DeClaire, before he started, and then after. I won't show it unless we have time, but one of the things that struck me was the things that he memorized and how to introduce himself and where he's from and all that. When asked, he had no idea what they were asking him, and I feel exactly the same again. And so that's been one of my focuses, is to be able to respond to inquiries or respond to things. And these are just a couple of examples of ways that I've started color coding for some simple songs. This Are You Sleeping? I did Art Bite last year, to where we learned to sing the song Are You Sleeping, and use the color coding to help us see the patterns so that I don't have to talk about the language. Even when we're using written words, all of a sudden our minds are open. And then this one we just did, I taught this one a couple weeks ago, Santa Glusi, must be Santa, to help visualize the patterns so that we can start to understand them better. And one thing that has been really, really impactful for me is I couldn't do this. I couldn't color code them. So I actually had to have a conference with a couple elders separately to try to do that, to translate it back to English. And it seems like within the last couple of classes, somebody spoke to the difficulty in crafting how we set up so that we can actually learn what we need to from our elders and mentors without getting all lost in linguistic talk. And so with the practice, it's becoming easier, but I'm still not there yet. But again, I absolutely give credit to having learned about this program in shifting how I approach trying to learn. Here are some of the slides that he shared. And then in Fairbanks, the first thing, actually, let me go back to the first thing they did was introduce people, but not in the way that we normally introduce people. So I don't remember exactly how he did it. The only English they were allowed to use was their own names, so that I would say I'm Mary, and we would not get into our native names until day 2. And so he would say, this is Mary. Do you know Mary? Mary is a girl. And then just keep asking and demonstrating, and with a couple people to recognize where the differences and where the similarities are, so that we could start to understand what he's saying. And that was very powerful for me as well. And then, so finally, then he would point and just say the name of the animal, let us repeat, so that we wouldn't have to get stuck trying to explain or use English. And I found it so interesting that these farm animals, which are so foreign here in Alaska, are part of their cultural heritage. So that those little tidbits just crack me up, and I find fun. And here are the resources. I know we don't have much time, so I will stop for now. And if you look in YouTube and search Mohawk language before and after is how I look for it, then you'll find this, and it's just fascinating to watch. This is after 2 years, this particular example, and the parts that I had set aside for us to watch were the ones that he shared with us, because that's what drew me in. So I will stop sharing so that I can see better.
Susan, can you share that presentation with the class so that they can view the videos directly from it? It's a really good presentation. Thank you.
I'll put it in chat for now and figure out how we might be able to email.
I know I have access, but I bet everybody else does.
I'll make sure it's available for anyone to view right now.
And we worked with Rochelle in our presentation because Rochelle has had firsthand experience in an immersion setting. And so I think what I'll do next is just, if you had any questions for Rochelle, to bring in her experience in this to share with the class.
Wonderful. Yeah, do you want to tell us anything about it?
Oh, sure. I'm wondering if one of you two might be able to share the slideshow I shared with you. I'm unable to share my screen. But would do either of you have that handy on your email?
Yeah, I can pull it up.
oh goodness, sheesh. This summer I did a language immersion camp in Shitka with my grandmother and my daughter and another small child and two elders and another adult. So it was an intimate group with ages that varied and different levels of learning. But I was thinking, yeah, just talking about some points from the adult immersion and if there's any questions. But the photos do a lot of the talking too. I guess, yeah, I'm not sure if I should, maybe if you wanted to look through them all, and then maybe questions might generate from the photos, or should I narrate through it?
I have a question.
Oh,
Did you find it or observe it easier for, I'm assuming like the elders were your like reference points, the fluent speakers, right? And so was it easier for the kids learning to interact with them in the language, or was it easier for the learners who weren't children to interact with the children because they were both learning?
oh yeah, that's a great question. So there was we had some guests who came and visited us, but we basically had two people who are pretty well off in the language, and the rest of us were learning. So I think camp happened right when there was a huge outbreak of COVID, and so in Shitka, so a lot of people backed down. So it was a really intimate group, which was really nice actually. But because of that, and because a lot of us are beginner intermediate, it was difficult to stay in the language as much as we had anticipated. I think if there's more of the language surrounded, it's easier to pick it up. And then like sometimes when a question is being directed at you, you feel under pressure and it kind of everything goes out the window. But if you're listening to more people talking in the language and observing, you can pick it up a lot more. But the curriculum was more geared to the adult learners. But I feel like personally I would have learned better if it was through like kids curriculum, because it's like it's really fun and engaging and like digestible, and you repeat it a lot. So I feel like the kids were our teachers in the ways of like they knew when they needed to take a break. They connected like on another level to like the nature and their surroundings, and like you could see the old soul tap in, and the young boy, he was learning English. So through that age, you're kind of like you can see how like, oh, he'll repeat like just the end of the word, like Suzak was talking. And our teacher Kuhiek noticed by observing her grandson and how he was absorbing the language, like how to help better teach us. And so yeah, in a way the kids were our teachers too. I hope that answers your question. If anyone else has any other questions too.
How long was the camp for?
It was about a week long, and it was at Dog Point Fish Camp, which is not too far from. It's like a 10-minute boat ride from the boat harbor in Shitka, but it's like away from cell service. And I went one time to the grocery store, and during it, when I was getting out of the boat, my phone dropped and so I was like completely had no phone the camp. And like we pretty much stayed, like that was the one trip. So we all just like stayed isolated away from everyone. And even though we didn't have like internet access, the phones were mainly to like document, record, and take photos. But I did notice my daughter having a huge withdrawal going from like having access to like phone, whatever she wanted to do on it, to nothing. But there's like 3 days where the first day was rough, and then by like 3 days, like nature was just like the best toy ever, and she didn't think about like what she was missing out as much on like the media world. She's 8.
So Yannick, Rochelle, I have just 3 slides to share with the group here on the Salish Adult Immersion Program. And the way I approached my sharing with you all was to try to do it from a 10 to 30,000 foot level of one particular adult immersion program. Did I say that right? And so I'm gonna change my screen over to this presentation and just grant me a second here. Whoops.
While you're doing that, I just want to say little introduction for Rochelle, for I know you're Akwan, so legal introduction for allowing us to learn our language on your land. And I just wanted to mention, after I had my open heart surgery, that I lost my short-term memory because I was under for like 12 hours. But I started immersion with Medigue and Athlete out. I would meet with them for 2 hours every morning. So I was able to get my short-term memory back by just speaking the language. So I just want to say legal introduction.
Oh goodness, geez, for thanking us for the land. That's so sweet of you, and I'm so glad that you're able to recover and get that part. And I'm so sorry that you had to overcome that battle. And let me know if you need anything. Goodness, geez.
All right, I'm concerned that you guys aren't seeing a full screen here. Can you see the slide?
Yes, but it looks like we see the secondary page. Looking at the presenter notes, which it's all good. It's all good.
Let me see if I can figure this out. Okay, is that better?
There we go.
Yeah, the title's not shown, but that's okay. You know, when you use PowerPoint template, and sometimes they go further than you want. Oh, there we go. So I just wanted to do an overview of the Salish Adult Language Immersion or Adult Language Program. And I just want to recognize that on November 17th, we had classmates that did a very thorough presentation of the Paul Creek Salish method. And that's part of this adult immersion program that we're sharing today. So if so that November 17th presentation really leads into how this immersion program works. So it's this immersion program uses a curriculum that, as was shared on the 17th, is a part of the Salish school system curriculum. And they also use this Paul Creek method in establishing their curriculum. And I've got Salish written twice there, sorry. One of the things I wanted to highlight about the program that I learned as I was looking into their information on their website is they place a strong emphasis on creating a safe place for learning. And they also very intentionally address lateral violence. They have a component to their immersion school called lateral kindness training, which was a new term for me. And so the 3 of us did a little bit of research when we were preparing for today, and we're really excited about what that entails. So that's something that that people might be interested in learning more about if they're planning adult gatherings. And this is kind of how I felt I understood kind of the overall, like Yvonne used the word corpus the other day about really developing a corpus. And I agree with that, with the master apprenticeship approaches we were talking about. I also see it in this adult immersion school for the Salish language. One of the strong components is elders provide the immersion experiences, and then advanced learners transcribe and record stories. And then this generates literature and documents for the future. And the stories are recorded and they become a part of the resources that are shared with bands, students, schools, and libraries. So the program isn't just creating adult speakers, it's creating more material, more momentum, and kind of like a flywheel moving forward for their revitalization efforts. And in 2019, they had 8 graduates with 16 that had spent 1,600 hours over 4 years. And what I thought was interesting is the way they structured their time. It looks like it was 2 days a week, travel to a location over that 4 years to get the 1,600 hours. And they graduated intermediate level speakers with that commitment of time. When I was thinking about 8 graduates, to me, I was like, that's an astounding number, because in my language, our number is negative. It's on the other side of 0. That's our growth. That's our projected growth right now. And 8 graduates is amazing and shows so much potential. So that was my quick overview of the program. And I just wanted to ask Rochelle a question related to what I saw interesting about the Salish program. What are your thoughts about creating a safe space for learners, and how did you experience that in the you're a part of?
Yeah, fortunately, Kuhiek is a very gentle teacher, and so her approach is she doesn't even correct you in the language when you're getting to know it, because she knows about like the intergenerational trauma and learning the language in the schools. And so so once you're feeling comfortable with the language, then she'll notice like little things that keep repeating themselves, and then she'll make those gentle corrections, and then she'll only do it half the time. And then as you keep practicing, you sort of just start to hear them yourself, and you're able to self-correct, and sometimes you'll be like, oh, I know this isn't quite right, and then ask for help and she'll give it. But I'm so thankful to have had her as a Tlingit teacher because of her gentleness. And I was actually able to observe her on teaching in the middle school and high school and college. And that was really neat to see her working with different learners of different ages and levels. And like one student in the high school, she said, this student, she always sleeps during my class, but I don't say anything because this is an elective class and she chose to be here. And even if she's sleeping through it, she's picking up bits of the language, and she's like being surrounded by the culture and the stories. And so like, I'm not going to shame her or like make these bad associations with the language, that just really warmed my heart. And usually people, like, especially in schools, are like really harsh with sleeping, but who knows what's going on at home. And that's like the safest space you can be in, knowing that like your language and your people are taking care of you, and you feel comfortable enough to like fall asleep even. I just really love that viewpoint. And I feel like sometimes with our languages being taught in the schools, so much is changing because it's an oral language, and here we are spelling it out and creating letters, and oh, you spelled that wrong, and it's like so easy to get caught up in that. But like just being surrounded by the language, it just cradles you. And I'm thankful that that we had a similar viewpoint on like teaching style. So it was easier for me to pick it up in that way. And I just think it's so important to have that safe environment, even if you're an adult. One like little remark from a classmate or something, it's such delicate work and so fragile. It can like turn someone off from the language completely. And so just, yeah, lifting each other up and surrounding each other with love, it's so cool. And I love that that lateral kindness. I just think we could all use that, especially during that time. Hope that answered your question.
Did Cleanna? I don't know if anyone else has any questions.
That was wonderful. Any thoughts, questions, folks? So thinking of these two, and I know folks who are doing this work. So my primary contact is Deho, Jeremy Green. We did our PhD program together, and he went through the adult immersion program, and he also works in their language schools right now as a principal. And so, and then I know Michelle Johnson and some of the work that she has done, both among the Tlingit, but primarily among Salish, and trying to sort of model theirs. And so when you do like an adult immersion program, I think some of the things to think about is where is the facility? Like there should ideally be a facility, and there should be people who are residents. So like you're there for a specific amount of time. And I think it doesn't have to be like just one thing. Like I think you could, like for some people who might see this as something that's very difficult to just do, I think you could have sort of long-term, medium-term, and short-term folks who are all living there. But the key is like they live in the language, and that so you do have to have a coordinator who's very good at creating a home environment, a safe space, a welcoming space. You can cycle people in and out of in terms of like having folks visit. You could do immersions in this space. You could do a whole bunch of stuff, but like creating a home for the language is like pretty crucial. And then I think you could have folks who could do like a 2 or 3 year commitment, right? And then figuring out how to fund this thing is a big question, because they should be paid so that they don't have to go, and they should be fed and they should be taken care of. And I do think there's ways to do this. I will say, I think the Mohawk language program finds ways to fund itself as well. And so they exercise their sovereignty as Indigenous peoples, and they trade and sell a lot of stuff that helps to fund their program. And so it's not always just grant driven, but they also have, there's some funding that gets made from perhaps just some different activities that they engage in. I don't know. But so that they have their own economic sovereignty, which is really important. But so I think you're going to have a physical space, but maybe it starts small and it starts to grow bigger and bigger. But then maybe you have someone who says, well, I can't do 2 years, but I could do 3 months. Could I do a 3-month thing? And so that you can have someone who's there for 3 months. And then what I would think of it as like almost like a retreat, like a getaway, a spa type of thing. Like, let's say we're in the language community and I say, hey, your language is getting a little bit choppy. You might, you've earned yourself a 2-week stay at the language spa, which is really like the adult immersion place, just to go and, because sometimes if you're teaching just little teeny pieces all the time, you can really lose your ability to be in whole language. So I think it's a wonderful thing, and it can link to all these other programs that we've been talking about. Eva?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think one of the biggest challenges we've come up, having created a safe space and a home for the language, just in the form of a language nest, is finding people who are able to make the commitment, who are the first language speakers to be there every single day, or, even if it's just 2 or 4 hours a day, not the full 8 hours a day that, a couple of us have committed to. And that's really challenging. It's a big commitment for people. And oftentimes our first language speakers are older. So just energetically also just to keep up with that kind of a pace and that kind of rigor within the language. But yes, I think that having the resources to support both the teachers and the learners is, I think, a big key, and how to make that happen. But also, yes, everything in the presentation was great. And it was like, it really resonated with my experiences of both the pilot fish camp immersion programs. And I thought a lot about preparedness of people who are going into an immersion and an all immersion program. And if people are prepared kind of equally, then you're able to advance much more quickly in an adult immersion setting. Whereas if you have even just a couple of people who are very, very beginner, you tend to spend a lot more time catering to, or at least in my experiences, the people who are very beginning level, and you're covering very basic language with them a lot, versus kind of deepening the knowledge of people who might be in the intermediate act full category of language learners to kind of get them further along. So anyways, a lot to think about in the context of it. But also, yes, too, I can't remember her comment about early childhood. I'm all about it just because that's the experience I'm in, is like, I love learning along with babies because I'm learning at the same pace as them. But actually the language we speak to our babies is really equivalent to like second year or some of the languages, even third year of college study level language and language, which is also a funny thing because we're using like optative forms of like you should, or you could, or would you like to, or like stuff like that you really don't get into, at least for Gwich'in, until you're, fourth semester or something of studying the language at a college level. So even though it's early childhood language, we are learning and using more advanced phrases and commands and questions.
I see. And I also want to sort of emphasize like the development of literatures, like to have such a wide variety of literature that I think comes out of these programs is really important. And that what the adult immersion program I think can bring to your language is like this whole language environment. So like you might have programs for kids, you might have programs for school children, you might have programs for adults, and then you have this thing which sort of can glue a lot of that together. And so that if you have immersion events, you have this small group that is living in the language full time. And so they can help people move into the language as well. And you'll find that I think it brings a lot of that environment sort of to the table already. It's like, yeah, we're already living in the language, so come on in and we'll show you these things and we're going to help you. And we've learned it because there's also this really interesting bridge between like birth speakers and the adult second language learners that are starting to come and take over the role of those who are going to hand over the language to the future generations. And they become like almost these translators for those who are learning, who already know English, and they can really help people move between the two languages. Other thoughts?
I have a quick thought on this. I'm building a safe place. What I really liked about the fish camp, because you see me in my fish camp vest there, is that we had visitors that came, and so that it was safe enough for elders to go through the trouble of coming up to the point in their boat and walking along the shore to come in and to add something to what we were talking about. I think that says a lot about the community, and I'm sure that if we had it open to more speakers and that elders were made to feel just most welcome, that we may find that there's a lot more that want to be involved. And I remember when Carrie Edwards was doing her classes and elders would come and she'd pull out another chair and add more food, and Florence, when she had her classes too, everybody came. And so I think that's a really important element to feeling safe. The community is involved in the teaching of the students. That's all I wanted to add. Finish, Chief?
Geesh. And yeah, and you're going to have some folks who they can understand the language, but they need encouragement and help to unlock that speaking side of it. And so, yeah, and again, coming back to these safe environments and welcoming environments and taking care of each other and being kind. And then you might have some decisions to make in terms of as you're interviewing folks, like let's say you built a program that was really successful. Ideally, maybe you're taking 10 new people per year, and then maybe you've got 30 applicants or 50 applicants, and that's wonderful. But then you are going to have to sort of turn some folks away. But not that you're going to deny them opportunities to learn, but like who's going to be in this group and who's going to sort of help the group sort of be a home, right? Because people generally have to, they have to get along and they have to sort of, but then you also have to do this in a way that you're not just picking people that you think will be your friends, right? And so it's very interesting to sort of build these programs and to build these movements and to also realize like we don't have to think the same, we don't have to have the same approach, and we do have to have multiple opportunities and ways to learn and times and ways to correct people and to get into the deeper parts of the language. So fabulous. And then, yeah, and then there's going to have to be this group that becomes the next generation of advanced speakers, because they're going to have to take things into these, you know, getting into the deep verbs and stuff. Like, you know, it doesn't take much. Like, you could have folks who've been studying our language, Tlingit, for decades, and then we just put on a recording of some elder, and all of us will sit there and say, we don't know what they said, you know. And so, but then to sort of deal with that sort of thing and be the ones who are kind of out in front and trying to figure out how to, you know, make sure that the language is intact and that you have those deeper parts of it that are sometimes only a few people remain who know how to do those things. So we got about 20 minutes left. I know we've got dual language and language medium, and I think some folks might have presentations still to give individually. So I want to just sort of see if anybody wants to do an individual presentation, and we'll see how much time we got left in terms of, but we could talk about, when we're talking about like a language medium and a dual language program, like those are entire educational systems. And so for some of us, we may not be there yet. But I think this is something that we do need to understand what it is and how to build towards that. Because generally, my recommendation is sort of like look at these programs and have community classes and have classes in maybe the university and then construct a language nest and then figure out how you're going to do that, because it's very resource intensive. And then develop an adult immersion program so that you're creating more adult speakers to be able to talk to these babies who are learning, who are growing up in the language. And then you're figuring out how to take care of all your existing speakers while you're doing that. And then if those things are taking off and you're teaching people how to teach your language and how to teach through your language, then you build a kindergarten, first grade, a second, 1 year at a time. And you just construct this, and that's the big step, and it might take 3, 4, 5 years before you're even ready for that. But that's what they did in Hawaii, is they built it 1 grade at a time. And the big difference is dual language says, well, we spend a part of our day in English, then we spend a part of our day in our indigenous language. And language medium education says, we only do this in our indigenous language. And so for a lot of those programs, they don't even teach English until the 4th grade. And then they start teaching English, for example, in Hawaii through Hawaiian. So you'll learn English, but it'll be through Hawaiian. And they know how to speak English, of course, but they don't read and write very well at all. And you just have to know that, because that's not the goal, you know. And so someone was going off about like, you know, well, my kid was in that program, but I pulled him out because they couldn't read or write, and they're in the 3rd grade. And I said, are you talking about English? And they said, yeah. I was like, well, then you don't understand what the school is for, and that's okay. But it's not to teach them English. It's not. They will learn it, and they can read and write just fine by the time they get older. They're not slowed down at all. They're ahead of the curve. Their graduation rates are through the roof. It's 100%. It's 100% graduation rate for 30 years. So it's very hard to sort of push back against their success rates. But dual language is different. So dual language would usually look at Navajo and what's going on there in particular and what they do. And basically, if you're not there yet, you could start off, like if you built your own school, you could start off as an English medium school that teaches your language and does a lot intensively with your language and your culture, and then have a plan to transition to a dual language school and then transition to a language medium school. Because if you don't have enough teachers and stuff, then sometimes you got to do that. But the one thing Larry Kimura kept telling us is he said, don't wait until you got the money and you've got the curriculum, because you're never going to get it. You just got to go, because then you have to figure out how to do it. And they told me like really hardcore things. Like he says, yeah, I was a teacher. I did it for $5 an hour because we didn't have any money. And I said, well, I don't know if I have that kind of dedication, but those might be some of the things that it takes. But the other thing is to continue to push to rearrange the ways that we show how we value things. So I know some folks did some research on language medium education. I want to give you an opportunity, but first I'll see, does anybody have anything else individually to present?
Yes, I do have the language program presentation.
All right, go ahead.
Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Alrighty, so we were going to do our presentation on a language program. I just went straight to the one we're in. One of the first things we were required to do was audio review, just to pick content and push towards non-passive listening, to come home with some sort of vocabulary and language retention, maybe the same story, and translate it and transcribe. Some folks are in the cohort study group, folks getting together, and they come up with a lot of fun content. This semester didn't really work out for me, but in our early semester, the study group, there was a lot of folks coming together and doing assignments last second, helping each other out, and finding things in their own language niches that were just an interest. Let's see. Okay. And then the practicum students, that was cool. Folks got to have different teachers that they were assigned to. For my own, it was with Nay Brown in a beginning Tlingit class, and we were just coming out of that sort of language level ourselves. So it was a really great way to practice previously exposed content and have it become more solidified yourself, and then get to kind of act as a buffer and give students who wanted to ask questions a little bit more one-on-one. Summer internships were a lot of fun. Folks went off in all different directions at different times, and between culture camps and transcribing and working with language teachers, folks got to practice their language skills as well as their teaching skills. And for me, it was mostly class management. There wasn't a whole lot of language immersion, but going over the summer content was a lot of fun. And then for our classes, just like in this one here, just seeing the different teaching methods that folks use, how we can look at that, their successes and some of their drawbacks. And, you know, I was doing my 30-year language vision, trying to think of, in Dreamland, thinking of a voyaging school. And then Frank, the counselor here at Chatham School, came up and he gave me a t-shirt for their voyaging society school that exists over in Hawaii. And so, you know, to look at things that already exist, imagine how we can do them in our language and adapt our own cultural lens as well. So, yep. Ooch, cheese.
Sheesh. Okay, thank you for sharing. And yeah, so we're building this cohort here, which we're learning a lot, and we're always open to feedback and how things are going and how things could improve. I do want to ask the folks who are doing language medium education if you had anything you wanted to share. I know we're running short on time, but I want to give you some time.
Ladies, do you think we can get ours done in warp speed? I think so. No. Okay, I'm a fast talker, let me share. Okay, which is very convenient because we use the same format for our slideshows. So for ours, huh? Yes, seamless, exactly. So ours is, of course, language medium education, which kind of goes, so, you know, adult immersion leads into language medium education. By definition, it's teaching educational content through the targeted language, increasing the amounts of exposure the learner gets. So it's essentially just teaching through the language. And as we present, we're going to be teaching, we're going to be presenting in a kind of a very casual, there's two of us that have slideshows that we like to share, and then we have personal experiences that we want to share. And then I think there's some pictures and a website to share with us as well. So I'm going to start off with slideshows for the Maori, and I have, excuse me. I just had somebody walk in, so it kind of distracted me. So I'm going to present with slideshows about the adult immersion. After me, Kaskatina is going to share continuous slideshows about the Ojibwe, the elementary medium education program, and then Kaskatina is going to share with her experience having gone to Hawaii with to observe the Olelo Hawaii pre-K immersion program, and then Shook A is going to share the Sami, and that's going to explore the university and beyond. And for the Maori, there was the total immersion for adults was in New Zealand, and they basically started off kind of very simple, started off with an assessment of the language. There was less than 100 fluent speakers so in order to turn the situation around, they created immersion courses to help develop speakers. And what I really liked about this program is sometimes there's programs and then there's rules that are implemented and then say, in order to do this, you have to do this. It was kind of implemented by them, and it was a choice. It was like a self-imposed ban on English. And I think I really like that word, self-imposed ban on English, because it shows initiative. And then the first course, of course, was the first round. So there was it was a lot of fear. It was very intimidating. People are wondering, how could I possibly, speak, or how could I communicate? How could I survive? Is what one of the quotes is in the in an immersive program. It was initially 10 days long, and then it was once a year, and and then there was a lot of, when you can't communicate through the language, there was a lot of miscommunication. So with the progressive and development over time, they began to do improvements. So the preceding years, they improved it. And since there were it was offered for university credit. They increased the organization and the structure in which they separated the groups in as first-year learners versus second-year learners. And the first-year learners were there to learn and pick up and gather as much information as language as possible. And the second-year learners looked past the language use and were more about picking up the medium, the understanding the message behind what was being said. There were clear expectations of students' language use, like what the outcomes, what they were expected to do after the 3 years of the immersion program. The 10-day program was reduced to 7 days, and it was a structured class times, start times and end times was really important so that everybody had an equal amount of time with elders, whether you had your answers or not. And end times and regarding bedtime was also really important because like they would go late into the night until 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was really important for everybody's health to have, rejuvenate, to be able to decompress, to process everything and then start again fresh the next day. Burnout happens. And I think that's what they're trying to avoid, is the burnout. They also increased the teaching approaches in the same way that we're doing today. They included, what I really liked this was physical activity, and it was all in the language. And it was scheduled specifically right after lunch so that the students wouldn't, like oftentimes we eat lunch and then we come down and sit down and are just tend to fall asleep. And that was probably one of the most insulting things you could do at the immersion program, is fall asleep in class. So it encouraged refreshing your spirituality mentally and physically. And at the end of the program, there was this great celebration. I really like that because we often have talked about, I remember Dick Danhauer saying, you like, okay, so yeah, you learn the language. When you go to school, you learn a language. And then how do you celebrate? You go to a different culture, you go to Mexico, you go to France, you get to use the language. But he would say, so how do we celebrate? Oh yeah, you get to go to Huna, you get to go to Angoon, let's go to Yakutat, and so I kind of think back at those, and I really liked how this celebration at the end, they had a concert and they would have the music would be in English or Maori or both, and they removed the band for English, but first language learners, because they had immersed themselves so much that they didn't immerse themselves as how you would in the water, they didn't want to get out of the language use, so they continued to use that. They chose to stay in the language. And they would wind down by letting off steam in a healthy and positive way. And then there was really important takeaways for the program that just like what we're doing now, this is still in development. I think it started with the Master Apprentice, and then there's this, that's the cohort. And I guess we're all still searching for the most effective ways of reviving the language. And that's one thing that I know, I'm sure we've acknowledged, and I think it's said, but I think to really take it into account that we really must take full responsibility for our own language learning. And that's coming from the elders, the tutors, and the students. I think everybody is under the same impression, acknowledging that it's not easy and it's going to take a lot of discipline, and that there is strength in the language, and the language strength, it'll strengthen ourselves. And by doing that, it was also without being said, I guess alcohol wasn't allowed and cigarettes and food weren't allowed in certain areas, which is again something, having a clear head, clear mind, clear heart, you walk away. And I think it also encourages learning to be at peace with oneself. They mentioned religion. I tend to not try to highlight religion. I guess that's probably my own bias, but I think being at peace with yourself is religion in whole. And it became so well known that they just couldn't take the needs. They couldn't meet the needs of everybody who wanted to join to learn, because it was a lot of work. So priority was given to those who would take away the organizational ideas to set up their own immersion courses. And I'm going to hand it off to Kaskatine, who's going to share the Ojibwe.
Wonderful. Just as we're transitioning, the Hawaiian Medium School does sing Christian songs and use Christian prayers.
I had a question because after attending David's Catholic services, I was like, oh, I know Eucharist. And then I thought, wow, those aren't clan songs. I wonder if we can teach those to kids. And I thought, oh no, that's religion. We can't do that in school. So I was like, wonder if I could find non-religious songs. Sure.
Yeah, because I was there and they kept saying Yesu, and I was like, "What's Yesu?" And they're like, "It's Jesus." I was like, "Oh, really? Oh, okay." Yeah, and so it's an interesting conversation, and I think it's something that every language and culture is going to have to figure out. It's not an easy thing, and it could be a bit of a trap in some ways. But for them, they just said, yeah, well, for Hawaiian, it was very common in Hawaii for someone to go to multiple, be pretty non-denominational about it, but then also some people are gonna just feel differently. Like I probably wouldn't be the biggest fan of bringing hymns into a language environment, but at the same time, I went to language immersions, and the elders would be so happy and would sing them. And I remember Irma Lawrence singing, hymns in Haida, and so it's part of things.
I think it's similar to my earlier statement about, all these things just kind of lead naturally and organically in a certain direction. And I think at least for our approach, it's just like individual spiritual growth is an individual journey of all of us in life. And, over the course of our life, we might shift to different foundations and ceremonial practices. And so we kind of just support, at least in my mind, we just support all people around us explore their own journey and path to spiritual development, but try not to kind of force one particular way of being or thinking or religion onto young people.
Yeah.
And I think that's more in alignment kind of with at least my understanding or way of thinking about Indigenous values and knowledge and practices. And so anyhow, but yeah, I think it's one of those areas where from my perspective, it's important not to be the priority focus to resolve that in some way, because then it'll just take away from all of us working together in the ways that we need to advance the language revitalization work.
Part of your work is to make room for everybody, and that does sometimes require some adjustments, and also just continually monitoring your own perspectives and biases and stuff. So. And we're okay if we go a few minutes over, and if you have to leave, go ahead. It's being, but I want to respect the folks who did some work, so I want to turn this back over to Gil.
Yes, we did a lot of work, enough that we actually don't think we're gonna finish our presentation in just a few minutes. We each have a bit of stuff. Skanjat's got 26 slides actually. Most of it is pictures, but yeah, we're not going to do this in 1 minute. Jinkasu'i did warp speed, but okay, we're all staying then.
Yeah.
Get ready for about a half hour.
Let's go. And yeah, it's recorded, so if you folks have other things that you had to do, it's also there, but don't leave if you can. Stay.
Let's go, Dan.
Also, so there's no confusion, Tuksha and I are here together in person. So I looked into the Anishinaabe Ojibwe who are down on the Red Cliff Reservation in Wisconsin. The school was, the method they did, language medium education, the students receive their instruction all in the target language with hopes that they're going to produce more natural speakers. And this is hopefully my thing is blocking me. I can't see that, but Wado cutting. I'm so sorry, y'all. I heard it in the video, but I'm nervous, so I can't fucking say it correctly. Wado Kodaring Ding. I'm so sorry, but yes, that's the school that there's in Ojibwe. Oh my gosh, why can't I see this? There we go. Those who were putting this program together, they are doing looking into a lot of the same languages and methods that we've been looking into, like Maori, Hawaiian, Arapaho, Blackfeet. And so the study that I was reading about Ojibwe, they quoted this Dijong from 1998, who was also studying Ojibwe, and he found that bilingual learning or partial immersion are not effective enough for us to produce natural speakers, and that it's most effective if we start total immersion really young, ages 18 to 30 months. So basically just before preschool, when all of their learning abilities are exploding and starting to grow. What they found that a majority of these language medium programs had in common is that they all had that strong necessary link of language and culture being together. They had steady support from parents, families, communities, and their tribal government, all investing plenty of time, money, and energy, even to the point that I have in my notes that the Arapaho down in Wyoming, when they were doing their program, it was meant to be free, but they wanted it to keep going on. And so for it to happen over the summer, they had to pay a $500 tuition or a fee. And so like that proves the family's dedication and investing money. I also have the David DeJong, he cited, oh, excuse me, I already said that, I'm sorry. Oh, I have a video of the school. Is that all right if I play that? I think I have it. Share sound, right?
We knew that the number of existing elders who spoke Ojibwe fluently, who were raised with Ojibwe as a first language, were vastly diminishing. So we knew we had to do something quick, and so that's why we started Warukudaring.
Warukudaring, it's a place where our language lives, where the Ojibwe language lives.
Inabikizajig, the Abaji egg wagino ega she egg, Nashke dash beijing.
Language, I think with any cultural practice, it has a specific vocabulary and teachings that are associated with each activity in that practice. So for instance, all the words about boiling sap, the way that it boils, have specific terms that describe it very, very accurately, that allow you to develop a deep comprehension of the activity and why you do it and how you do it.
Oma, Wayne Dijuan Zinzaba Kodabu Mitigon, Wiko Biduyan, Akina, Zinzaba Kodabu, Aking da Atamagad.
I always say it's an educational experience for students, but it's a community movement. We're facing some really unique challenges right now.
We have a lot of statistics that are against us, that we have a lot of issues with abuse and suicide that show us as not being the most healthy of communities. And I always think of it not just in terms of our culture surviving, but really our people surviving.
I didn't learn to speak Ojibwe as a child, but when I started studying it as an adult in college, I quickly realized how much knowledge and capacity there is in a language to know who you are, where you come from, how to see the world in that unique way.
Asin, Hujwagen, Masanaigan.
It's certainly academically rigorous. It's not just a culture program, it's not just a language program.
Kiwabandanawana Asian Agwak Eske Wabishka Wabishka Boom Naseigan. Yeah. Take kiddo yaman. Ultimately, it's prepping them and building an intellectual framework that they'll be able to apply to and adapt to, no matter where they are in the world. That will help them. And I think they're prepared with knowledge and ability that they feel proud of, that they feel connected to their ancestry in a deeper way. They have a much broader and deeper understanding of Ojibwe perspective in relation to the local community, the local environment, and the world.
So yeah, the Ojibwe had their own space, like Hune was talking about, where the language can live, be with the land if they need, like those kids got to be. So we need that for Tlingit and bringing in more identity. I know that we have the TCLL for elementary already, but I know that that's also in a school that is all in English, so they're not even just totally surrounded by the language in their literacy program there. But when I did my practicum over in Huna last year, I thought it was something really cool to share. I don't have my picture of it, but in the language classroom, Miss Wright, she has posters of each clan or nationality or race of people, and so there's pictures of every single student up on those things. And so since I was the practicum like student teacher, she put me up with my clan, the Kagwantan, and so that was really cool to see they're like starting to at least really switch back and bringing in the culture part to the language, just so that yeah, sorry, keep rambling. But now here is Skanjat is going to talk about Hansenai and Hawaii schools.
Hatala is Hangagang. I'm going to keep my video off. I am hotspotting on my phone, so I'm just going to try and keep everything going smooth. Okay. I also keep mine in this mode. So whoever said that, I'm same here with you. Okay, Sandra Hinuti Kyang. And we're doing the language medium education. So I wanted to share the document here. This is really awesome for ideas to copy or use from. I like the approach from this. It's a cultural based curriculum design and instructional method. And I pulled a few important parts out of here, but if you wanted to see the document, there's a link here to go to that document. But the few important parts I wanted to point out is, what is this document? Basically, it's a culture-based instructional model grounded in Hawaiian. I don't want to read everything here just to save time. You could go through and read it, but one of the important things I liked about this is where it says what it is not. It is not meant to be a prescriptive curriculum. It promotes an instructional model that empowers teachers to improve their craft of designing meaningful curriculum. It is not a framework. Basically, it's giving you the ideas of the culture, but also and giving you a pathway to make your own curriculum, following the same framework, kind of a same kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It's beneficial to go through and read it, is all I'm gonna say. Sorry. So here they kind of break everything down into these 4 areas. And these are the 4 R's: relationship, relevance, rigor, and responsibility. And I'll share the documents. You guys could read these too. And one of the big things that they have is their traditional Hawaiian learning instruction. This is kind of like their what they base all their curriculum on, and how they build their lessons, kind of their lesson example lessons here. They include observation and listening, reflection, imitation and doing, questioning, independence, proficiency, generosity. And then this is the traditional Hawaiian learning continuum. So I really loved this, and this inspired me to reread Potlatch as Pedagogy by Sarah Davidson and Robert Davidson. So this is the Hawaiian version. This is to me, their values, their cultural morals and values and who they are, their identity, but putting it into the classroom, kind of a deal here. And then, so this is what I was saying, Potlatch as Pedagogy. And I'm just going to sum up. If you haven't read this book, I really highly recommend to read this book. It basically gives Robert Davidson's life experiences, learning his culture, and then trying to bring it back to life, basically, and what he learned through those experiences, his life lessons. And he is cultural based, and his daughter explains that her mind is more classroom based. So she wanted to put this book together to put the culture into the classroom. So I would like to read this quote. It says, "As I reflected on the ways in which my father had used the potlatch as a form of pedagogy, I realized that without knowing it or intending to, he had used the skata principles to teach about Haida ancestral knowledge. Through the preparation and hosting of potlatches and feasts, he has demonstrated that learning emerges from strong relationships, authentic experiences, and from curiosity. That learning occurs through observation, contribution, and recognizing and encouraging strengths, and that learning honors the power of the mind, our history, and our stories, as well as spirituality and protocol." And then they break that down into examples of what they mean when they say these things. Learning emerges from strong relationships, and he gives a great cultural example, and then she will go through and kind of tie it into the classroom. So these all have quotes. I'll let you guys read this for sake of time here. Authentic experiences, and I don't think this is necessarily a framework, but this is something to base curriculum off of, being able to put the culture into the classroom. And I thought this was a great example to lean on as upcoming teachers. So I didn't want to read all these, but it breaks it down. And the big one, I know we talk about this one, I did want to read. A lot of curriculum doesn't talk about spirituality and protocol, but they make a big point here on to include it. Though it may not always be appropriate to share ceremonial knowledge publicly in a school setting, we need to recognize that the spiritual knowledge is a significant aspect of the knowledge that our students bring with them from their homes and communities to school. We need to ensure that we do not undermine the knowledge with our teaching. Spiritual understandings may significantly contribute to our students' identities, and they need to be honored and respected. And I thought that was just a great quote on what we were just talking about, having the religion in the school. So I did want to emphasize this one, and I thought it was great to just make that connection really quick. So I did get to go to Hawaii and see the Punonaleo preschool, and actually the elementary or grade school, and then the university. So I just included a few pictures. Every single, this being a language medium education methodology, they include every aspect of their culture in their architecture, in their teachings, in the way that they position the building. Every single thing was thought of. So this is just at the very opening, the same way we might have Devil's Club above the door. They will have their protective items at their doorway. And then this is just to show how they include it, their culture and everything. It's on the walls, their history, their beliefs, their poems, their basically who they are is everywhere. It is in your face. This is language medium education. You do not escape the language, do not escape the culture. And to explain this, circle down below, that was represented like in the entryway. This is the umbilical cord that connected the ancestors down to the present and then to the future as well, as Larry explained it, I believe. I know it's being recorded, so I don't want to misquote anything. Okay, and then we went to the preschool. So this is the Punana Leo. I love this idea of the boots outside because we also need boots, and it's so simple but effective. And this is a picture of one of the instructors at the front, and just to point out on the lower corner, the big book, the big blue book to her side, that is actually Bible verses. So they very much did have the religion in their curriculum. And all the posters, I kind of took close-ups to include. This is pretty much her everyday routine. She'll sit there and go through almost every one of these posters. They go through the calendar, the month, day, year, the weather right here in the middle, the chore chart or whatever they might call it. In my house, it's chore chart. And who's doing what. There was more examples, colors, emotions, things like that. Everything in the language from the moment they get there. It's all in the language. So here's a quick little video to show that I took when we were in the classroom. And one thing that I do love that I know that Lance has mentioned before was how quiet and respectful the kids just, they are. It's so quiet. There's no fidgeting around. There's no loudness. They just pay attention. And the smooth transitions. I really love how quick it was for the preschool kids.
O Yehova ku'umalamalama a me ku'uola. O vaila ka'umea e maka'u aku ai. O Yehova kaikaika o ku'uola ni. Ya vaila u e veli veli aku ai. Mai e helu helu fua e ho'opili mai ana ke i kone. O Yehova. O Yehova. E hana o kako. O Yehova. O Yehova. Ku'umalamalama.
Okay, and then one thing that I was very impressed with at the preschool, they do have a tuition and there's a long wait list. But one of the things that they require is that a parent is there a certain amount of hours contributing throughout the week. And I know that there's been talk about, especially even at Hansinai and other nests, that the parents don't want to come because they're intimidated, they don't know the language, and how do we include them? So they solve that by requiring the parents to be a part of the daily activities throughout the whole day, snacks, whatever it may be. And so it's kind of hard to see, but this is I snapped a picture of their weekly schedule. And it has different parents on there and what their job is. So as soon as the day starts, everybody knows exactly what they need to be doing. There's no questions. If they don't know how to say, what should I be doing in the language, they don't need to know that because it's right there. They just go to the board and they don't need to ask. So that helps a lot with the language issue and no English as well. And I love how organized and color coded it is, but that's just me. Okay. So Hune mentioned it earlier and I was going to mention it too. One of the biggest things that advice that Larry offered when we were there, because we were a week from starting and opening our doors when we went here. It was very fast. So we had a lot of questions and he basically said what everybody else was just saying. You'll never be ready. You'll never feel like you're ready, but you also don't have the time to sit around and wait until you feel ready. So you just have to do it. And he said, you know, we failed also. Well, it wasn't a failure because they learned from it, but their first preschool go around didn't succeed. And then they restarted and tried again. So that was very inspiring when he said that. And we took that and we ran with it. Like I said, we were opening the very next week when we got back home. So in September of 2018, we opened, and this is the grand opening of Hansinai in Heidelberg. This is Kuyang Benyang and some of the staff here. I'm right here holding one of the babies. And a bunch of the participants down here that helped get it started, or parents that were all there at the opening. So yeah, I think modeling after Punana was a huge help to see it hands-on how they did it. I would love to go back. I'd have a lot more different questions about more so about the disciplining and stuff, but really when we were there, they didn't need it. When you're upfront about your expectations, you know, right from the get-go, and you know exactly what the routine is and you set it to the kids, you know, they were really good. So I didn't see any discipline problems when we were there, but yeah, other than that, how
Fabulous, amazing. And I know we could go all night, but we got to stop. I want to thank you so much, though, for putting in incredible work for all of you this semester and for really sort of putting this stuff together. Did you guys have more? Was there more? Was that it?
Yeah, I have some more on Sami language. Sorry, okay. Let me share my screen. So mine is going to be pretty short. Just a couple more minutes, guys. Sorry. I also have class in 6 minutes. So yeah. So I gathered information on the Inuri Sami. They are located in, or their ancestral homelands are located in what is now Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Russia. And they have about 10 different dialects, but I chose to focus more on Inuri Sami. So just because they've had so much success in the past about 3 decades. So I thought that this was really interesting. Between the 1960s and 1997, there were only 4 children who were learning Inuri Sami in their homes. And in 1997, 2 language nests were opened, and that's when the real revitalization efforts started getting serious. And in just 24 years, there's estimated to be over 400 speakers, and people are able to attend schooling from pre-K all the way up until university completely in Inuri Sami. And I think that's an amazing feat to be able to achieve in such a short amount of time. And they were able to do that primarily by the modernization of their language. So that included creating new vocabulary, breaking the rules of what is considered traditional language use, and the popularization of Inari Sami. So since the year 2000, there have been about 15,000 new words created. That is so many new words. And these new necessary words were discussed and compiled by teachers, parents, and other language activists that were involved in the university language medium school. And then that list of words were then brought to an expert group of other elders and other language activists. Gosh, I lost my place in my notes. So yeah, that list of words were brought to that expert group. And this group was were really the people that were at the front lines helping shift the language into a language of use. And they were the ones that spearheaded the front of shifting away from a really puristic view of the language, meaning that most of these elders weren't really excited about the younger people making rock music and rapping about things that are usually deemed inappropriate, like sex and drugs and gangs and things like that. But the elders were able to look forward and let go of the past and see that the younger generations are using the language, and that's what's the important part, and they're excited about using the language. Really all of this normalization came about by using the language in every domain at their schools. Okay, so now I will show, gosh, this little bar is covering my tabs. Now I'll show the website for the university that is conducted mostly in Inari Sami. I think also Finnish and English classes are offered. And one really interesting thing is that at this university, you can learn English and Finnish through Inari Sami. So that's kind of fun that these kind of colonizer languages are being taught through a minority language. So there are all of these different educational degrees from like large animal husbandry, wildlife management. You can become a chef in Inari Sami. And this was all done since 1997. And with their phenomenal success in such a short amount of time, I think with the same amount of dedicated people who have the right supports from the right corporations and right organizations, we can have the same amount of success in our Southeast languages. And I really wanted to have this discussion. Maybe we can pick it up on Monday. So we were thinking that language medium education schools are kind of the pinnacle, they're the goal, the dream for all of our languages here in Southeast. And we wanted to know that after this whole semester and after learning about each method that we've talked about each week, what is everybody's ideas of how we can use those methods or aspects of those methods to plan our next 30 years to get towards or get closer to language medium education.
Fabulous. You folks did amazing. All of you did amazing this whole semester. We got to wrap it now, but yeah, let's talk about that on Monday. I think the short answer is you don't have to pick one thing. You get all of these things and you put it together and you culturalize it to what you folks are doing. And that's the whole thing that we sort of keep coming back to. And then to make sure, even though the semester's ending and I put an extra week on the syllabus and messed everybody up, which I take full responsibility for. But I think we are not done. Like, this is a lifetime of conversations as we sort of continue to say, okay, let's keep building this stuff, and then let's build the support structures that pull this all together, so it doesn't feel like we're running out of time just to figure out how to do the thing, that we do have the time and energy. And all these folks that we're looking at, like, we are all, between all of us, we have connections to every single group we've looked at this whole semester, so we can also bring them up here and we can connect with them. Like, if you folks want to look at discipline, like, I'd say bring Namaka and Na'ilima up here. Na'ilima was the one who he is the child whisperer. I don't know how he does it, but he's like, get this room full of 3 different classes all running around this big gymnasium going crazy, kids just running around playing ball, having fun. And he looked at us, he said, watch this, I'll say 3 words in Hawaiian and those kids will stop. They'll get dead quiet and they'll put everything away and get out of here. We're like, no, what do you, and he stood up and he said 3 words. And he said it nice and loud, stopped. Not like, it didn't even take 3 seconds. It just like, it was like kids stopped in in the middle of their running. They just froze and just put everything away. So on that note, I don't know what those 3 words are, but I'll just pretend I said them. And we'll see you folks on Monday. You guys are doing amazing stuff.
Thank you, everyone, for giving us this time.